Coroners Court is now sitting.
Good morning. Just take appearances, please.
May it please Your Honour, my name's Castleton. I appear with my learned friend Mr Wilcox, assisting Your Honour in relation to these matters.
Thank you, Mr Castleton.
May it please the Court, my name is Woodland. I appear for the Commissioner of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, the Forestry Corporation of New South Wales, Fire and Rescue New South Wales in relation to vehicle design and safety, and the Kian Road fire only. And I have also been asked to mention the appearance of National Parks and Wildlife Service.
Thank you, Ms Woodland.
Your Honour, before I commence, can I just outline the schedule for today and the remainder of the week? Your Honour has set aside time this week for closing addresses in relation to a number of Stage 2 hearings, cause and origin hearings and related inquests into particular deaths. For the purposes of today, I propose to address Your Honour firstly on Your Honour's Stage 2 inquiry into vehicle design and safety. That will then be followed by an address in relation to the cause and origin of the Wattle Creek Lake Burragarang fire and the related inquest into the deaths of Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer. My learned friend Mr Wilcox will address Your Honour on the cause and origin of the Green Valley Talmalmo fire and the related inquest into the death of Samuel McPaul. And then finally, Your Honour, will address Your Honour on the Kian Road South Arm fire and the related inquest into the death of Christopher Sava. If it's convenient to Your Honour, I propose now to address Your Honour in closing in relation to Your Honour's Stage 2 general inquiry into the safety of firefighting vehicles used by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and Fire and Rescue New South Wales. Over the course of the 2019-2020 bushfire season, 3 tragic incidents highlighted the need to reassess the fitness of vehicles used by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, the RFS, and Fire and Rescue New South Wales. As Your Honour knows, Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer died whilst responding to the Wattle Creek Lake Burragarang fireground on 19 December 2019. Their RFS truck was struck by a burning tree as they travelled along Wilson Drive in Buxton. Their colleagues, Carlos Quinteros, Benjamin Fraser and Timothy Penning, were seriously injured. Samuel McPaul, Your Honour will recall, died responding to the Green Valley Fire Talmalmo on 30 December 2019. His RFS truck was lifted from the ground by a fire-generated vortex and dropped on its roof. Andrew Goody and Rodney O'Keefe were seriously injured. 2 further firefighters, Darryl Aldridge and Irene Pachos from Fire and Rescue New South Wales, sustained serious injuries in a separate incident on 10 November 2019. A tree fell onto their appliance whilst they were responding to the Kian Road South Arm fire. Your Honour, in each incident, the vehicle's cabin was partially crushed. As part of a general inquiry, Your Honour has received evidence about whether each of the vehicles were fit for purpose and whether further directions should be given as to the most appropriate cabin protection for frontline firefighting vehicles. Before turning to each of the 3 incidents, we take this opportunity to acknowledge that revisiting those tragic circumstances may be immensely painful for the families, friends, colleagues and communities of Samuel, Jeffrey and Andrew. Those who were injured during the incidents, namely Carlos Quinteros, Benjamin Fraser, Timothy Penning, Andrew Goody, Rodney O'Keefe, Darryl Aldridge and Irene Pachos, and of course those who responded to each of those tragic deaths. Coming, if I may, Your Honour, to the Wattle Creek incident. Shortly before 11:30 p.m. on 19 December 2019, Jeffrey Keaton was driving fire appliance Horsley Park 1 Alpha along Wilson Drive, Buxton, in response to the Wattle Creek fire. Andrew O'Dwyer was in the front passenger seat. 3 of their crewmates were seated in the rear of the vehicle, namely Carlos Quinteros, Benjamin Fraser and Timothy Penning. Horsley Park 1 Alpha was an RFS Isuzu chassis dual cab, Category 1 heavy tanker appliance with a gross vehicle mass, or GVM, of 13.7 tonnes. Whilst the truck was travelling at about 70 kilometres per hour, a large burning ironbark gum tree of approximately 30 metres in height broke away from its burning base and impacted the top of the vehicle's roof and windscreen section. The fall was sudden and could not have been anticipated by Jeffrey. The force of the impact and damage to the vehicle likely caused Jeffrey to immediately lose consciousness and lose control of the vehicle. Horsley Park 1 Alpha continued travelling forward from the southbound lane into the northbound lane, dragging a tree branch which had broken away from the main section of the tree. At a location approximately 60 metres from the initial collision, the appliance left the northbound lane and continued travelling up and along a dirt and vegetated embankment. After travelling a further 32 metres, Horsley Park 1 Alpha started to rotate in a clockwise direction. It rolled 270 degrees before coming to rest on the offside of the vehicle. The cabin was compressed significantly rearwards past the steering wheel, and Your Honour sees that displayed now on the screen. Tragically, Jeffrey and Andrew died from their injuries. Carlos, Benjamin and Timothy sustained serious injuries. Turning now, if I may, Your Honour, to the Green Valley Talmalmo fire incident. Late in the afternoon of 30 December 2019, at a property known as Lightwood in Jingellic, the crew of Appliance Culkin 2 Alpha were responding to the Green Valley fire. Culkin 2 Alpha was an RFS Isuzu Motors FSS 500 Category 2 crew cab manufactured in 1999. That afternoon, the vehicle was reportedly fully laden with 1,800 litres of water with a mass of 1.8 tonnes. The gross vehicle mass of the vehicle was estimated at between 11.8 and 15 tonnes. Just after 5 p.m, the vehicle is believed to have been lifted at the rear by a fire-generated vortex. The truck was inverted and dropped on its roof, resulting in significant cabin roof crush. And Your Honour sees that evidence in the photograph now displayed. At the time, Andrew Goody was driving the vehicle. Samuel McPaul and Rodney O'Keefe were in the rear of the vehicle in an area known as the crew refuge area. That area is an open area within the rear tray of the tanker. Tragically, Sam died as a result of his injuries. Andrew and Rodney sustained serious injuries themselves. Turning, if I may, Your Honour, to Kian Road fire incident. About 3:14 p.m. on 10 November 2019 at Coulters Road, North Congarini, tanker 397S had parked at a fire ground to clear a fallen tree. The tanker was a Fire and Rescue New South Wales Isuzu FTS 700 4x4 6 locker, which provided seating for a crew of 6. It is believed to have been manufactured before 2000 and possibly around 1994. It had a gross vehicle mass of about 12.5 tonnes. In the left rear passenger seat was Irene Pachos. Darryl Aldridge was in the right rear passenger seat, with Luke Babula and Leslie McQueen occupying the 2 front seats of the vehicle. As Irene began to alight from the truck's cabin, a tree of approximately 60 metres in height and with a diameter of 1 metre snapped at its trunk, fell and landed across the rear of the passenger cabin. Irene was knocked to the ground. Darryl, in the right rear passenger seat, was struck by the collapsing roof of the cabin and pushed up against the bench seating. Both sustained severe injuries. And Your Honour sees the impact to their fire appliance displayed on the screen now. As Your Honour can see from each of the images already shown, all 3 vehicles experienced cabin crush. Firefighting truck cabins sit in a regulatory vacuum. There was consensus, as Your Honour will recall, amongst the experts who gave evidence that during the 2019-2020 bushfire season, and now, there were and remain no compliance, crashworthiness strength or energy dissipation requirements for truck occupant cabins to protect the driver and or passengers in the event of any rollover or impact crush, frontal or side impact, or tree fall incident. Further, no mandatory Australian design rules or ADRs or Australian standards that cover this aspect of truck cabin design. And finally, no mandatory ADRs governing the minimum static rollover threshold, or SRT, for heavy trucks in Australia. It follows that there cannot be an assessment of fitness for purpose and adequacy of fire appliance against Australian standards. However, where a vehicle has been exposed to a particular set of circumstances and has been shown to be structurally weak or to have not performed, this provides a specific foundation to assess how fire appliances design can be improved from a FOPS, that's falling objects protective structure, and or ROPS, rollover protective structures, perspective to provide protection to occupants in the future. In relation to the Green Wattle Creek incident that claimed the lives of Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer, the truck complied with relevant European standards. However, the evidence of Professor Gibiata was that energy demand on the truck's front portion from the falling tree was overwhelming. Compliance with the standard was never, in his opinion, going to mitigate such an impact. The kinetic energy was around 47 times the minimum energy required by the European standard. Professor Gibiata stressed that the speed at which the crash occurred was very high and the severity of the impact would have been particularly difficult and very complex, if not impossible, to design against. This view, as Your Honour will recall, was shared by Dr. Richardson and Associate Professor Logan. Dr. Richardson also expressed the view that the incident was probably an unsurvivable event in almost all vehicles currently on the road. Similarly, the truck occupied by Samuel McPaul on 30 December 2019 was, in Professor Gibiata's view, not fit for purpose in circumstances where the cabin collapsed like a frame structure without any bracing. And Dr. Richardson agreed that the vehicle was not fit for purpose in the particular circumstances, being the upending of the vehicle by a fire-generated vortex, which generated winds up to 300 kilometres per hour. In terms of the Kian Road fire incident, Professor Gibiata gave evidence that had a FOPS or ROPS been installed or the crew cabin appropriately strengthened, then this might have produced a sufficient reduction in crush such that Irene and Darryl might have suffered only minor injuries. That evidence was largely uncontested by Associate Professor Logan and Dr. Richardson, although I should stress Dr. Richardson gave evidence that such a structure may not prevent all injuries and that those same structures can create their own engineering issues and limitations. Ultimately, Your Honour, there was a consensus amongst the expert that engineering solutions need to be explored to maximise the protection of firefighters within RFS vehicles. The precise protection required needs further review and testing. To that end, the Monash University Accident Research Centre, which has recently done extensive work for the RFS in response to recommendations from the New South Wales Bushfire Inquiry, has recommended that the RFS establish a fit-for-purpose set of rollover falling object test criteria and assess potential engineering solutions in an experimental setting. Deputy Commissioner Stewart gave assurances to the court in his oral evidence that this recommendation would be implemented. The procurement process has continued since that inquiry and the RFS intends to complete testing within this financial year. Despite those assurances, which we have no reason to doubt, it is submitted that a recommendation should be made to the same effect. This, in our submission, Your Honour, will ensure that compliance with the recommendations is picked up by governance mechanisms for reporting and not fall by the wayside, although given the RFS commitment, this is highly unlikely to occur. It is therefore, Your Honour, submitted that an appropriate recommendation is as follows. Recommendation 1 to the Commissioner of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, that the RFS engage MUARC or an equivalent expert body to establish a fit-for-purpose set of rollover and falling object test criteria, and B, assess potential design solutions for rollover and falling object protection in an experimental setting. I don't understand, Your Honour, there to be any objection to that recommendation by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service. Can I just touch upon briefly, Your Honour, the position in relation to an Australian standard? As I said a moment ago, there is plainly a regulatory vacuum of standards for the construction of firefighting vehicles, particularly in relation to FOPs and ROPs. Professor Gibiata advocated for the establishment of an Australian standards working group of experts, regulators and practitioners to draft a standard for all emergency vehicles that addresses the crashworthiness test criteria and experimental setting for testing of rollover protection, falling object protection structures and cabin strength for frontal impacts for firefighting trucks. Professor Logan and Dr Richardson saw merit in this proposal, but they noted that this would lead to additional requirements being put in place specifically for firefighting. Regardless, an Australian-wide standard, in conjunction with Deputy Commissioner Stewart's observations of New South Wales agencies' purchasing power as a block, could have great utility in our submission. It may be more likely to bring about design changes by manufacturers to produce vehicles that provided added and effective protection for firefighters in New South Wales. In written submissions, the RFS raised concerns about the proposed recommendation that RFS engage with AFAC, that is the Australasian Fire and Emergency Services Council, and Standards Australia with a view to the development of an Australian standard. Those concerns, Your Honour, were broadly twofold. First, the extent to which the proposed recommendation regarding an Australian standard required RFS to act independently of other agencies, the RFS being only one member of AFAC, and secondly, the need to ensure any work on an Australian standard does not prejudice RFS's work with MUARC. AFAC comprises emergency services agencies from across Australia and New Zealand. Your Honour cannot recommend that interstate agencies work with the RFS to pursue the development of an Australian standard through AFAC. However, the RFS, like any member of AFAC, can itself raise matters with AFAC. It does not need cooperation from other firefighting agencies to do so, even though cooperation may be desirable. In those circumstances, a recommendation that the RFS engage with AFAC for the purposes of the development of an Australian standard in our submission is entirely appropriate. AFAC could then engage with Standards Australia. That process could be accelerated by those assisting, Your Honour, providing the relevant evidentiary material directly to AFAC. Any concerns that work on an Australian standard could delay the RFS's work with MUARC could be addressed by the proposed recommendation, specifying that the RFS's work with MUARC is to be pursued parallel with or alongside work on an Australian standard. Your Honour, following a process of collaboration with the RFS, it is submitted that an appropriate recommendation is as follows. Recommendation 2 to the Commissioner of New South Wales Rural Fire Service, that in its role as a participating member of AFAC, RFS is to make representations to AFAC to the effect that AFAC is to consider engaging with Standards Australia in relation to the development of a data-supported minimum Australian standard or standards which addresses the crashworthiness test criteria and experimental setting for testing of rollover protection, falling object protection structures and cabin strength for frontal impacts for such firefighting appliances, noting that any such representation should not impede the work of RFS in implementing safety measures at the New South Wales state level. In order to assist this process, Your Honour, it is submitted that Your Honour make a further recommendation in the following terms. Recommendation 3 to the Commissioner of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, that the RFS provide AFAC with a copy of the following documents. Expert reports of Professor Raphael Gibiata, dated 14 December 2022 and 26 March 2023. New South Wales RFS Fleet Safety Summary Report of Monash University Accident Research Centre, that's MUARC, dated March 2023. New South Wales RFS Vehicle Safety Technical Report of MUARC, dated March of 2023. Transcript of the oral evidence of Professor Gibiata, Associate Professor David Logan and Dr Shane Richardson, given on the 29th of March 2023, and a copy of any findings relevant to this inquiry, the inquest into the death of Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer, and the inquest into the death of Samuel McPaul. Your Honour, by way of final remarks, can I say that those assisting, Your Honour, express their sincere gratitude to those who have aided and provided information to the court to assist with the general inquiry into the safety of firefighting vehicles used by the RFS and Fire and Rescue New South Wales. And of course, Your Honour, we also express our sincere condolences to Jeffrey's, Andrew's and Samuel's families, friends and communities for their tragic loss. My pleasure, and that concludes my closing address in relation to vehicle and design. If it's convenient, Your Honour, I'd like to address Your Honour in relation to the cause and origin of the Wattle Creek Lake Burgarang fire. Your Honour, these are the closing submissions for the inquiry into the Wattle Creek Lake Burgarang fire. This inquiry has been conducted pursuant to Section 30, subsection 1 of the Coroners Act and is accordingly limited to determining the cause of the fire and the area of its origin, if able to be established to the satisfaction of the court. As Your Honour will recall, the Wattle Creek fire started in late November 2019 and was recorded out on 10 February 2020, burning for a period of almost 11 weeks. During this time, the fire burnt an area of approximately 278,200 hectares of land across the Goulburn, Mulwaree, Oberon, Upper Lachlan, Wingecarribee and Wallandilly local government areas, encompassed within the lands of the Gunungara and Wiradjuri and Dharawal people. And Your Honour will see on screen now the progression and reach of this particular fire as at 3 February 2020. Tragically, as Your Honour knows, on 19 December 2019, New South Wales Rural Fire Service firefighters Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer were killed as a result of a falling tree impacting their appliance whilst they were fighting the Wattle Creek fire. Numerous other firefighters and residents were also treated for injuries sustained fighting this particular fire. The Wattle Creek fire caused great loss to the community and the surrounding environment. 37 homes were destroyed, over 100 properties suffered significant damage, and nearly 240,000 hectares of native vegetation was burnt in national parks, including the Blue Mountains National Park, Canangara Boyd National Park and Natai National Park. The Rocklilly Wombats, a wildlife sanctuary set in the southwestern corner of the Blue Mountains National Park, suffered significant damage to approximately 38.9 hectares of the 40.5 hectare sanctuary. The loss of native species, including wombats, koalas, endangered brush-tailed rock wallabies, eastern grey kangaroos and greater gliders is immeasurable. The Green Wattle Creek fire was one of many fires burning across the state of New South Wales during the 2019-2020 bushfire season. Not all fires, as Your Honour knows, were reported to Your Honour. Not all fires reported to Your Honour proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin. Not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin will continue to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of stage 2 of Your Honour's proceedings. The Green Wattle Creek fire and the related deaths of Jeffrey and Andrew was the subject of a further general inquiry into the safety of firefighting vehicles used by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and Fire and Rescue New South Wales. These submissions, Your Honour, are limited to the cause and origin of the Green Wattle Creek fire. I'll just briefly set out the relevant chronology of events. On the morning of Wednesday, 27 November 2019, smoke was reportedly sighted in the Blue Mountains National Park from lookouts in Katoomba and surrounding suburbs. Several officers from the National Parks and Wildlife Service were tasked with undertaking a reconnaissance flight on the helicopter Park Air 3 to obtain intel on the locations of fires, their status, and to provide a holistic view of the landscape to assist with devising plans of attack. During that flight, the officers detected 3 fires: the Green Wattle Creek fire, the Red Ridge fire, which was burning in the central Blue Mountains, and a smaller fire being the Butchers Creek fire, which was reported to be only 2 or 3 smoking trees and largely self-extinguished. At 9:03am that same day, National Parks and Wildlife Service officer Tobias Setri took the first photographs of the Green Wattle Creek fire. You will see those aerial photographs now on screen. In those photographs, the fire can be seen in its infancy with smoke billowing from amongst the tree but no flames visible. And secondly, that it's in a remote location with heavily vegetated and mountainous terrain. After the helicopter returned to base, it was tasked with assisting the RFS in water bombing the Red Ridge fire. It was not until 2pm that day that the helicopter was retasked to winch National Parks and RFS crews into the Butchers Creek and Green Wattle Creek fire grounds. By the time officers returned to the fire ground at 2:45pm, the Green Wattle Creek fire had increased to about 32 hectares. Flame heights were reaching 3 to 5 metres, and the fire was accelerating swiftly uphill and over a cliff line. It was deemed too dangerous for crews to winch into the fire ground. Officers were instead winched into the Butchers Creek fire ground. Nicholas Nielsen, a field supervisor with the National Parks and Wildlife Service, described the conditions on that day. After some time fighting the fire on the ground with the assistance of 2 or 3 water bombing runs, there was a sudden flare-up and the fire jumped containment lines. Members of the National Parks and Wildlife Service and RFS attempted to implement a hand tool line, but the fire spread too fast. Nicholas moved to higher ground and saw that his team was almost entirely surrounded by the fire. As the team were extracted by helicopter, the fire began to form at their feet. A number of the team's bags began to catch fire. RFS Chief Superintendent Simon Davis states that significant retardant resources were directed at the eastern edge of the Green Wattle Creek fire to restrict its progression towards Lake Burragarang. Despite this, the fire pushed south overnight. The following day, that's the 28th of November 2019, the Green Wattle Creek fire spread approximately 3.7 kilometres to the southwest. A Section 44 declaration was issued that evening. The following day, on 29 November 2019, the fire had grown to 2,700 hectares and was mapped as spreading distances of up to 2.7 kilometres to the west and northwest. During this spread, the fire was mapped as coalescing with the area of fire previously named the Butchers Creek Fire. Rowan Lund, New South Wales RFS Air Attack Supervisor, took several aerial photographs of the Green Wattle Creek Fire at about 2:30pm on that day. that is the 29th of November 2019. And Your Honour will see now 4 of those photographs. Numerous other fires joined with the Green Wattle Creek fire over a 16-day period between 22 November and 7 December 2019. And Your Honour will see the fire progression map for 29 November. To the south-southwest was the Colong Stock Route, Yerendery fire. That fire was identified as going at about 4 p.m. on the 22nd of November. It was amalgamated into the Peaks fire on 2 December 2019. The Peaks fire was identified, Your Honour, as going on 28 November. It joined with the Green Wattle Creek fire on 3 December 2019. To the west was the Cowmung River fire near Oberon, which was identified as going on 27 November. It joined with the Green Wattle Creek fire on 8 December 2019. A short distance to the east of that fire was the Thurrat fire, Oberon, which was identified, Your Honour, as going on 27 November, and it joined with the Green Wattle Creek fire on 1 December 2019. So Your Honour gets a snapshot there of a number of fires burning in that general area and coalescing to join with the Green Wattle Creek fire in early December of 2019. To the north of these fires, Your Honour, was the Ruin Castle fire, Kadumba Valley, also known as the Mount Solitary fire. While the Ruin Castle fire burned in very close proximity to the Green Wattle Creek fire, they did not join. Nonetheless, the existence of 2 such fires of such significance in close proximity stretched, understandably, the resources available to fight both fires from the outset. On 1 December 2019, the Green Wattle Creek fire was mapped as spreading extreme and abnormal distances of up to 7.7 kilometres to the east and 3.7 kilometres to the west. Over the following days, the fire bore down quickly on the Peaks and Colong Stock Route fires and spread further to the east. The following day, 2 December 2019, the size of the fire was reportedly 54,600 hectares in size. That day, the fire had spread approximately 7.4 kilometres to the northeast. And as Your Honour has heard time and time again throughout Your Honour's inquiries into this bushfire season, it is uncommon for a fire to spread more than 7 kilometres in 2 consecutive days. By 4 December 2019, the fire had reached the western edge of Lake Burragarang and weather conditions were severe. New South Wales Police Detective Sergeant Daniel Clements stated that the fire took a significant run on this day, recounting that the fire took control, burning rapidly up a steep incline up into the surrounding of Natai, which borders Oakdale, Warrombi and Orangeville. This caused significant concern that the fire was going to jump Lake Burragarang into the valley and find its peak up the hill or mountain towards the nearby towns. Chief Superintendent Davis stated that at 4:57 p.m. on the 4th of December 2019, the fire spotted to the eastern side of Lake Burragarang in an area inaccessible to vehicles. The spot fire was attacked by crews from boats on Lake Burragarang and water bucketing aircraft. Westerly winds hindered attempts to fight that spot fire from the ground, and on 5 December, those winds drove the fire 13.2 kilometres to the east. The rapid spread to the east threatened the communities of Natai, Oakdale, Warrombi and Orangeville. That threat was realised the following day, that is 6 December. In severe weather conditions, which caused significant spotting, the fire ravaged parts of the communities of Natai, Oakdale, Warrombi and Orangeville. 11 civilians were extracted by New South Wales RFS search and rescue helicopter, and at least 13 structures were destroyed or damaged. And Your Honour sees there that particular progression to which I've just referred. By the evening of 8 December, the amalgamated Green Wattle Creek fire was reportedly more than 100,000 hectares in size. Between 10 and 13 December, the easternmost part of the fire commenced a narrow run just to the west of Picton. The run proceeded past Picton and ended up just to the north of Pheasant's Nest. On 13 December, Your Honour, south-southwest of that run, a small linear area of the fire started almost due west of Hilltop and grew over the coming days. In the middle of this fire and the Wattle Creek fire were the communities of Bargo, Balmoral and Buxton. And Your Honour sees the relevant fire progression map for 13 December 2019. On 14 December, the RFS undertook backburning in the Natai National Park west of Buxton. The RFS intended to carry out the backburn to line up with an area of low fuel that had been the subject of a hazard reduction burn in April of 2019. The backburn ultimately extended further south than planned, extending into an area with higher fuel loads. Just after midday on the 14th of December, the backburn started progressing towards Balmoral. By 12:45 p.m. that same day, the backburn had crossed the southern containment line and air support was called in. The fire took hold and continued to spread towards Balmoral over the coming days. The RFS investigation concluded that this unintended spread was due to a lack of clarity on containment line and backburn alignment and status within the incident action plan and operational mapping. This spread came to a tragic climax, Your Honour, on 19 December 2019. That afternoon, the fire made a run to the east, impacting Balmoral and then Bargo, including the Bargo Dingo Sanctuary. A southerly change then pushed the northern flank of the fire into Buxton. Brendan O'Connor, former captain of the Balmoral Village Rural Fire Brigade, states that every member of his brigade made the decision to stay, notwithstanding the unsafe conditions. They defended the village against the fire, saving lives, including 35 people who had taken shelter at the fire station as a last resort. And I'll just show now, Your Honour, an extract from a documentary, the voice over by Australia.
You're in absolute firestorm. It was day, but it was night. We fought our way back here because the other call came through that 35 people were now in the station, and the station was actually being impacted now.
When we got in the fire shed, everything was all hazy.
It was chaos. It really was. The fire shed was already under amber attack at that stage.
Outside, it was roaring.
Yeah, it was. You could hear the embers hitting the shed.
Our fire station is the place of last resort. They believed they were all going to die in here that night, potentially. We were running out of water. Firefighters had stayed and tried to defend. Just through sheer exhaustion, they'd collapsed where they were. We were absolutely spent.
The Honour will recall that footage being showed as part of Your Honour's inquiry, and that gives Your Honour some small insight into the intensity of that particular fire as it was developing on the 19th of December 2019. Tragically, Your Honour, it was during the response to this part of the fire that RFS firefighters Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer lost their lives. As at 21 December, the Wattle Creek fire was approximately 190,000 hectares in size. Further properties in the Balmoral area had been lost under severe weather conditions. Fortunately, a southerly change pushed the fire away from Yandera at a time when the fire was within metres of impacting properties. I'll just have displayed now, Your Honour, a fire progression map for 4 January. Between 22 December and 4 January 2020, the Wattle Creek fire spread on all fronts. The northwest flank of the fire extended into Jenolan and Jenolan State Forest. The northeastern flank had spread further past the Warrangamba Gorge. In the south, it had spread as far as the Wombian Caves and just past High Range. Most notably, Your Honour, there were 2 days during this period of extreme abnormal fire spread, 11 kilometres on 31 December and some 9 kilometres on 4 January. 3 homes in Jenolan and the Jenolan RFS shed were destroyed on 4 January 2020. Fortunately, several properties were saved by Fire and Rescue New South Wales using compressed air foam systems. Weeks of prolonged efforts of firefighting crews were able to defend the heritage-listed Jenolan Caves house, a 122-year-old heritage-listed building and an icon of Blue Mountains accommodation. Its loss would have exacerbated the damage caused by the fires to so many communities with the loss of tourism. It is a critical part of many residents' livelihoods. The effects were not short-term, with clean-up efforts extending the impact long after the fires had passed. From 5 January 2020 onwards, the spread of the fire was generally limited. At 2:14 p.m. on 10 February 2020, the Wattle Creek fire was recorded as out. In total, it had burnt approximately 278,200 hectares. Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of material comprising 2,161 pages, which includes statements from members of New South Wales Police and RFS, a fire investigation report, RFS operational documents, Bureau of Meteorology weather data and lightning mapping. Andrew Sweeney, RFS authorised fire investigator, Officer in Charge Detective Inspector Daniel Clements and Detective Senior Constable Thomas Dodd also gave oral evidence on 9 May 2022. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, Your Honour, holding an inquiry concerning a fire is required to make findings as to the date and place of the fire and the circumstances of that particular fire. In addition, Your Honour may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to any matter connected with a fire inquiry. In this inquiry, the central focus was, as I said at the outset, on identifying where and when the Wattle Creek Lake Burragarang fire originated and the cause of that fire. RFS lightning strike data shows 18 lightning strikes recorded between 11 a.m. on 25 November 2019 and 11 a.m. on 26 November 2019, the day before the fire was identified. And within the first mapped area of the fire on 28 November 2019, Your Honour will see some of those lightning strikes that were recorded in that particular time period. Detective Senior Constable Thomas Dodd overlaid some of these strikes with the first line scan of the fire taken at 12:18 p.m. on 27 November. He identified 2 lightning strikes as having occurred within the area of 2 hotspots that formed the early stages of the Wattle Creek. And you'll see that line scan and the detective's overlay on the screen now, Your Honour. On 21 January 2020, a cause and origin scene investigation was commenced by RFS authorised fire investigator Andrew Sweeney. On 22 January 2020, Mr Sweeney conducted a scene investigation by air. He took digital photographs and GPS coordinates. Whilst inspecting the area where the first sightings of smoke were reported, he observed and photographed trees that, in his opinion, had been badly affected by lightning against the burnt-out area. The photographs showed trees with damage markedly different to the surrounding canopy. The fire indicators such as foliage freeze and angle of char that Mr Sweeney could see from the air suggested to him that the fire emanated from 2 trees. And I'll just have displayed now for Your Honour's benefit a photograph of the relevant trees. The trees were located at grid reference 484286, the Canangara Boyd National Park, approximately 15 kilometres west of the Warragamba Dam. They were, as I've said earlier, in a remote area several kilometres from any roads or tracks. Mr. Sweeney could see no evidence of any other cause of the fire other than lightning. Following his investigation, which included a review of available lightning data at the time of the initial smoke sightings and canvassing of the relevant RFS and National Parks and Wildlife Service crews, Mr. Sweeney concluded that the Wattle Creek fire, in the absence of any other cause, was caused by a lightning strike during a storm event sometime between 25 and 26 November 2019. Mr. Sweeney, as I said a moment ago, eliminated other possible causes of the fire due to the inaccessible location of the area of origin and a lack of power lines, rail lines and or equipment use. There were no fire trails or roads in the immediate area. Your Honour, the evidence points to the Wattle Creek Lake Burgarang fire having commenced as a result of lightning strikes to potentially 2 trees in remote bushland of the Canangara Boyd National Park at grid reference 484286, some 15 kilometres southwest of the Warragamba Dam wall, sometime in the 48 hours prior to the sighting of the fire on the morning of 27 November 2019. Those assisting Your Honour express our gratitude to the officer in charge of the investigation, the RFS investigator and the witnesses involved in the cause and origin investigation for their assistance with Your Honour's inquiry into the Wattle Creek fire. Finally, Your Honour, we extend our condolences to the family and friends of Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer, who tragically lost their lives whilst selflessly aiding firefighting efforts against the Wattle Creek Lake Burgarang fire. Your Honour, if it is convenient, I propose now to address Your Honour on the inquest into the deaths of Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer. At about 11:30 p.m. on 19 December 2019, Jeffrey Wesley Keaton and Andrew Joel O'Dwyer were responding to the Wattle Creek fire near Buxton. As they travelled along Wilson Drive in Buxton, their New South Wales Rural Fire Service truck, as Your Honour is aware, was struck by a falling tree, causing the truck to leave the roadway and roll. Tragically, both Jeffrey and Andrew died, and their crew were seriously injured. Coming firstly, if I may, Your Honour, to Jeffrey Keaton. Jeffrey was 32 years of age. He was a member of the RFS for 13 years. He joined the Plumpton Brigade in 2006 at the age of 18. He had followed his father Wes's footsteps, another long-term volunteer and member of the RFS. In 2012, Jeff transferred to the Horsley Park Brigade and eventually attained the rank of Deputy Captain. On 2 April 2017, Jeffrey was awarded the RFS Long Service Medal for 10 years service. Jeffrey left behind his parents, Diane and Wes, brother Phil and Phil's partner Rachel, his partner and mother of his child, Jessica Hayes, and his son Harvey. As Your Honour recalls, he was farewelled at a funeral service at Pine Grove Memorial and Crematorium, Minchinbury, on 2 January 2020, where he was remembered for his devotion to his brigade. He was posthumously awarded the Commissioner's Commendation for Bravery and Service. As I've said before, and which I wish to amplify again, those assisting Your Honour sincerely wish to extend our gratitude to Jeffrey's loved ones who have generously assisted throughout these proceedings. We acknowledge the tremendous loss to Jeffrey's family, friends, colleagues, and his local community. We also wish to acknowledge the heartfelt statement given by Jeffrey's mother, Diane, on behalf of his immediate family and the photographs which they elected to share of Jeffrey and the extended Keaton family. Further to this, Your Honour, they shared a moving piece with that Jeffrey wrote when he was 11 years of age in his Year 6 journal about why volunteers play a big part in our everyday life. Jeffrey is remembered as a loyal friend who loves sport and the outdoors, especially fishing, camping and four-wheel driving. Coming now, if I may, Your Honour, to Andrew O'Dwyer. Andrew was 35 years of age. He had been a member of the RFS for 16 years after joining Fairfield Brigade in 2003. Andrew transferred to the Horsley Park Brigade shortly after joining, where he continuously served his community until his death. Andrew attained the rank of Deputy Captain and on 27 July 2013 was awarded an RFS Long Service Medal for his 10 years of service. Andrew left behind his wife Melissa and daughter Charlotte, together with his parents Errol and Margaret and his sister Amanda and her family. Andrew's funeral was held at Our Lady of Victory's Catholic Church, Horsley Park, on 7 January 2020, where he was posthumously awarded the Commissioner's Commendations for bravery and service. Again, as I've said before, and which I stress again, those assisting Your Honour sincerely wish to extend our gratitude to Andrew's loved ones who have generously assisted throughout these proceedings. We acknowledge the tremendous loss to Andrew's family, friends, colleagues and community. We also wish to acknowledge the heartfelt statement given by his wife Melissa on behalf of his immediate family and the photographs which they elected to share of Andrew and the extended O'Dwyer family. Andrew is to be remembered as a talented photographer who used his skills to give the world an insight into the life of an RFS volunteer. We also acknowledge, Your Honour, the joint loss of Jeffrey and Andrew to the RFS. The RFS state that Jeffrey and Andrew were great friends with young children born just days apart from each other. They were part of a tight-knit brigade for whom their loss was devastating. In the face of that devastation, and to honour the memory and service of their colleagues, the members of the Horsley Park RFS Brigade were back in the field battling the Green Wattle Creek fire less than 36 hours after Jeffrey and Andrew passed. It was an incredible display of selflessness and in what were undoubtedly tragic circumstances. It is clear that Jeffrey and Andrew touched the lives of many. There have been numerous tributes to their lives and many years of service to the community. Wingecarribee Shire Council, on behalf of the communities of Balmoral and Buxton, dedicated a memorial marking the location where the vehicle in which Jeffrey and Andrew were travelling in at the time the deaths came to a stop. In a collaboration between Wallandilly Shire Council, the Horsley Park RFS Brigade, Buxton RFS Brigade and other community groups, a fire truck memorial playground was established in Tilapia Park, Buxton, and dedicated to the lives of Jeffrey and Andrew. On 19 December 2020, 1 year after their deaths, the Horsley Drive M7 overpass was renamed the Horsley Drive Keaton and O'Dwyer Bridge. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, Your Honour, holding an inquest into the death of a person is required to make findings as to the identity of the person who died, when and where they died, and the cause and manner of that person's death. In addition, Your Honour may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to any matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future arising out of the death in question. In this inquest, Jeffrey and Andrew's identities are known, as is the date and place of their deaths. For this reason, the inquest into Jeffrey and Andrew's deaths focused on the manner and cause of their deaths. On these issues, Your Honour has received into evidence a volume of material comprising 378 pages, which includes statements from members of the New South Wales Police and RFS operational documents, Bureau of Meteorology weather data, emergency warnings and alerts, and 000 call records. In addition, Your Honour has heard oral evidence from leading Senior Constable Brian Wilson, Senior Constable Jeffrey Head, Adam Hurst, Carlos Quinteros and Andrew Gregory. Your Honour has also had the benefit of hearing a family statement to which I just referred in relation to Jeffrey, which was prepared and delivered by his mother Diane, and a family statement in relation to Andrew, which was prepared and delivered by Melissa. If I can just briefly touch upon the events leading up to the 19th of December. On Saturday, 14 December 2019, backburning, to which I just addressed Your Honour on, was undertaken in the Natai National Park to the west of the village of Buxton. That backburn was not implemented as planned. Just over 300 firefighters, 75 units, responded to the Balmoral to contain that backburn. That day, the Green Wattle Creek fire, which was west of Buxton village, was mapped as spreading approximately 3 kilometres south, and a new ear of the fire was mapped south of Buxton and north of Balmoral. The fire was reportedly at this stage 112,000 hectares and was continuing to grow. In the afternoon of 19 December 2019, the fire made a run to the east, impacting, as I said earlier to Your Honour, Balmoral and then Bargo. A southerly change then pushed the northern flank of the fire into Buxton. 47 homes and other structures were destroyed in Balmoral, Bargo and Buxton. The destruction and sheer ferocity of the fire faced by the communities and brave volunteers of the RFS on that day was horrific, and Your Honour saw the footage a moment ago that provides an ever so small snapshot of that ferocity. It was this part of the Green Wattle Creek fire that Jeffrey and Andrew were responding to on 19 December. I now pause to inform Your Honour that the court will shortly hear about the deaths of the crash. If any person does not want to hear these details, they can leave Your Honour's court now or turn off their video if they're watching the live stream. That evening, that is the evening of the 19th of December 2019, between 6:30 and 7 p.m, Jeffrey and Andrew reported for duty alongside their colleagues at the Cumberland Fire Control Centre. Adam Hurst was the strike team leader. A strike team would ordinarily consist of 5 units of the same type, in this instance, Category 1 appliances. On this day, the strike team was comprised of 4 vehicles, with the last vehicle having been damaged during the day and unable to join the group. The 4 vehicles travelling in the Cumberland Strike Team Bravo included Erskine Park 1, Horsley Park 1 Alpha, Castlereagh 1 and Regentfield 1 Alpha. In addition, Adam Hurst was travelling in a separate RFS 4-wheel drive vehicle. As Your Honour recalls, Jeffrey and Andrew's vehicles identified as Horsley Park 1 Alpha. It was an RFS Isuzu chassis dual cab Category 1 heavy tanker appliance with a gross vehicle mass of 13.7 tonnes. The vehicle was fitted with a tank of approximately 3,500 litres, which was fully loaded at the time. The vehicle had some cabin rollover protection in the form of a metal frame that reinforced the headboard at the front of the rear tray. I just have also shown next, Your Honour, a seating plan to remind Your Honour where the relevant occupants were positioned. Jeffrey was driving Horsley Park 1 Alpha on the night in question. Andrew was beside him in the front passenger seat. Behind Andrew was Benjamin Fraser. Timothy Penning was seated in the middle rear seat, and Carlos Quinteros occupied the final seat behind Jeffrey. Before the strike team departed, Adam Hurst conducted a briefing. At the time, no specific tasking was provided except to continue with general property protection. Adam stressed to the strike team the need to be vigilant in relation to trees as well as the normal road hazards at night and dealing with the impact of firebrands, a piece of burning wood. Timothy Penning, Carlos Quinteros and Benjamin Fraser recall parts of that briefing. Timothy recalls in his statement that they were told to be careful because there were a lot of trees coming down. Benjamin recalls being advised that the fire had come through hot, hard and fast, so the trees had been pretty burnt out. And Carlos recalls that there was an emphasis on the fact that the burning trees and structures that were already burned, which were raising some concerns. Following the briefing, the strike team were directed to attend Peak Road, Buxton, to assist in the protection of properties. Upon arrival, they discovered that the fire had already passed through and local crews had the area under control. Adam Hurst states that he asked the team to remain at Peak Road and at the Buxton RFS station until he got further taskings from the division commander. This was because early intelligence reports recorded that there were power lines down along Wilson Drive, Buxton. At about 11 p.m. that evening, Adam drove along Wilson Drive to ensure it was passable and safe. There were no obstructions. The strike team was then directed by the division commander to proceed to Hall Road, some 7.2 kilometres south, to assist with property protection and to monitor the fire conditions. This required them to travel along Wilson Drive. Adam Hurst relayed those instructions to the strike team and requested they proceed to that location to meet him there so he could put them into position. He states that he reiterated to his team to proceed with caution, specifically and probably more so, noting that the trees that were on fire were small in nature. In those conditions, the strike team travelled along Wilson Drive in a single line convoy. Sees the relevant road, Wilson Drive. Wilson Drive, Buxton consists of one northbound and one southbound lane, separated by a broken painted dividing line. The area either side consists of rural allotments surrounded by the Natai National Park and Bargo State Conservation Area. The strike team travelled in convoy in the following order. Adam in the RFS four-wheel drive vehicle, followed by Erskine 1, Horsley Park 1 Alpha, Castlereagh 1 and then Regentville 1. Adam Hurst recalls a slight breeze at the time, which you could tell from the embers thrown from the trees, but it wasn't gusting and would not have caused concern. There was a slight smoke haze, but visibility would have been about 150 to 200 metres, so he had no concerns about driving. He states there was no direct or active fire in the area and recalls the temperature was hot, extremely dry and extremely smoky. Weather observations from Camden Airport, the closest weather station, recorded a wind speed of 2 kilometres per hour with wind gusts of up to 8 kilometres per hour. Jeffrey and Andrew were in the second truck in the convoy. Benjamin Fraser says that they had the emergency light beacons on with no siren to help alert others that they were there due to the smoke. He recalls looking out the window and seeing small pockets of embers and smoke, but says it was not heavy. You could still see through it. Carlos recalls while heading along Balmoral Drive, there was small spot fires around the place. It was hazy, but visibility was still there and it was dark. There were no streetlights in the area, so the area was quite darkened out. He recalls they could see approximately 200 metres ahead of their vehicle. Andrew Gregory, who was in the truck travelling directly behind Jeffrey, and Andrew observed it was dark. There were things smouldering like bushes and trees down that were still smouldering into light. There was a bit of haze, and as the wind was from the west, it was pushing the smoke to the east, so we had a good view of the back of Horsley Park 1 Alpha, which was about 100 metres ahead. With the vehicle lights on, Andrew states that he could see that little bit more. Shortly before 11:20 p.m, and about 40 metres after passing Peregrine Lane, a large burning ironbark gum tree, a approximately 30 metres in height, broke away from its base and impacted the roof and windscreen of Jeffrey and Andrew's vehicle. It is believed the vehicle was travelling at approximately 70 kilometres per hour. This tragic moment was captured by the vehicle's dash cam. That video has been enhanced and slowed down by the New South Wales Police Forensic Imaging section. Jeffrey, as the driver, had little warning. The tree-fall was sudden and devastating. And before that's played, can I just provide a warning to members of the public that this may be distressing. After impact, Your Honour, Jeffrey and Andrew's truck continued travelling forward from the southbound lane into the northbound lane for about 60 metres, dragging a tree branch which had broken away from the tree. At that point, the truck left the northbound lane and continued travelling up and along a dirt and vegetated embankment. After travelling about a further 32 metres, the truck started to roll. It rolled 270 degrees before coming to a complete stop on its side. Your Honour heard evidence from the officer in charge, Leading Senior Constable Brian Wilson, Metropolitan Crash Investigation Unit, New South Wales Police, that there was no physical evidence of any braking or evasive action after impact. In his expert opinion, the force of the impact likely caused Jeffrey to immediately lose consciousness and, as such, a loss of control of the vehicle. Andrew Gregory, who was in the truck travelling directly behind Jeffrey and Andrew, described seeing the tree come down instantaneously in front of their vehicle. He says they had no chance of stopping. He further describes that he saw the rear lights of the truck fishtailing across the road, veering left to right, and seemed to lose control before hitting a dirt gutter on the side of the road and becoming airborne. The truck then rolled and came to a stop on its side with the passenger door facing upwards. Benjamin Fraser, who was directly behind Andrew, explains that he felt the tree crumple on him from his side. After the impact, he did not believe Jeffrey was in control of the truck. He says it felt like the truck sped up a bit after being hit. Then a couple of seconds later, I felt us go down into the ditch and then we rolled. I'm not certain, but I believe the truck did a full roll, as I remember being upside down at one point. The strike team had witnessed a tree fall onto a vehicle containing their mates. They witnessed that vehicle roll out of control and then ran to assist by providing immediate care. The bravery of their actions in those moments was extraordinary and should be publicly acknowledged. A number of RFS crews in the area also immediately responded to radio messages for help and attended the scene. It was evident to those responding that Jeffrey had not survived the impact. First aid was administered to Andrew before he quickly succumbed to his injuries. Benjamin Fraser and Timothy Penny were able to remove themselves from the back of the vehicle. The strike team and other arriving units worked tirelessly and successfully to assist Carlos with self-extricating from the vehicle. Benjamin, Timothy and Carlos were each conveyed to Liverpool Hospital by ambulance with serious injuries sustained as a result of the motor vehicle collision. At around 1 a.m. on the 20th of December 2019, Leading Senior Constable Wilson arrived at the crash site. He observed the road surface was made of sealed bitumen and appeared to be in good condition. Further, the weather conditions were warm and dry, but the visibility was poor due to heavy smoke. He located the remains of the tree on the road surface, shoulder and nature strip, about 40 metres south of Peregrine Lane. It was split into two sections, one being about 20 metres in length. The base of the tree was 4 metres to the north. The tree was about 4 metres east of the edge of the lane in which Jeffrey and Andrew were travelling in. Little was left of the base of the tree after the fall. You'll see a photograph of the base in a moment. The overwhelming majority of the tree detached from its base and fell towards the road. In the Work Health and Safety ICAM investigation report prepared by RFS into the incident, it is stated that this particular image that Your Honour just saw shows the tree had been burnt through by approximately 60%. Only 40% of the tree was left to support its gross mass. This, combined with several large branches hanging over the roadway, caused the tree to fall. That particular report posits that the remaining timber would have exhibited little control over the tree fall, with the fall instantaneous and unpredictable. Leading Senior Constable Wilson located scrape marks on the road surface in the immediate area of the fallen branches and formed the opinion the marks were left on the road by branches dragging on the surface after falling under the moving vehicle. As outlined previously, Leading Senior Constable Wilson gave expert evidence that he found no signs of an attempt by the vehicle to avoid any object, nor to slow down or react after the point of impact. It is his expert opinion that Jeffrey did not see the tree falling before impact. He did not even have the chance to do so. In his opinion, Jeffrey and Andrew were either knocked unconscious or killed immediately as soon as the tree impacted their vehicle. Senior Constable Jeffrey Head of the Engineering Investigations Section of the New South Wales Police carried out a forensic examination of the Isuzu vehicle on 8 January 2020. In his opinion, before impact, there were no mechanical defects in the vehicle that may have contributed towards the collision. As part of Your Honour's Stage 2 inquiry into vehicle design, Your Honour also heard evidence from Professor Gibietta that the speed at which the crash occurred was very high and the severity of the impact would have been particularly difficult and very complex, if not impossible, to design against. As Your Honour has heard already this morning, the kinetic energy was around 47 times the minimum energy required by the relevant European standard. To design a structure to withstand that falling object is not possible without substantial increases in mass and weight, which may have the unintended consequence of perhaps increasing rollover propensity. Dr. Shane Richardson, working with the Monash University Accident Research Centre, did not think that the fitting of any systems could have mitigated the impact. His expert evidence was that it was probably an unsurvivable event in almost all vehicles that are on the road at the moment. Coming now, if I may, Your Honour, to address on manner and cause. Both Jeffrey and Andrew's injuries were catastrophic. Coming firstly to Jeffrey Keaton, the pathologist at autopsy concluded that Jeffrey's cause of death was best described as being consistent with mechanical crush asphyxia. It is submitted that Jeffrey died as a result of mechanical crush asphyxia around 11:30 p.m. on Thursday, 19 December 2019 at Wilson Drive, Buxton, while on RFS duty at the Wattle Creek fireground after the fire truck he was driving was struck by a falling tree, causing the fire truck to leave the roadway and roll over. Coming now, if I may, Your Honour, to Andrew O'Dwyer. The pathologist at autopsy concluded that Andrew's cause of death was best described as being due to head injuries. It is submitted that Andrew died as a result of head injuries around 11:30 p.m. on Thursday, 19 December 2019, while on RFS duty at the Wattle Creek fireground after the fire truck he was travelling in was struck by a falling tree, causing the fire truck to leave the roadway and roll over. Finally, Your Honour, can I again express from those assisting, Your Honour, our sincere condolences to Jeffrey and Andrew's family, their loved ones, friends and their community for their passing and tragic loss. Our gratitude is also expressed to those who have aided and provided information to assist, Your Honour, into the inquest into the deaths of Andrew and Jeffrey, including but not limited to the officer in charge, Leading Senior Constable Brian Wilson, who is present in court today, Your Honour. Your Honour, that concludes my closing remarks in relation to the inquest into the deaths of Jeffrey Keaton and Andrew O'Dwyer. I'll invite my learned friend Mr. Woolcock Cox to address Your Honour on the cause and origin of the Green Valley Talmalmo fire.
Thank you, Mr. Castleton. Mr. Wilcox.
Your Honour, these are the closing submissions for the coronial inquiry into the cause and origin of the fire known as the Green Valley Talmalmo fire, which commenced on the lands of the Wiradjuri people within the Greater Hume local government area before crossing the Murray River into the state of Victoria. The inquiry is being conducted pursuant to Section 30 of the Coroners Act and is accordingly limited to determining the cause of the fire and its origin, if able to be established to the satisfaction of Your Honour. Tragically, on the 30th of December 2019, Samuel McPaul died while fighting the Green Valley fire on the Lightwood property in the Gingelic area. Whilst evidence in one hearing has been treated as evidence in the other, these closing submissions will address the fire inquiry and related inquest separately. It's significant to highlight that the Green Valley fire was one of many fires burning across the state of New South Wales during the 2019 to 2020 bushfire season. Not all fires were reported to Your Honour, and not all of those fires reported to Your Honour proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin, and not all of the fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin continued to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of Stage 2 of Your Honour's proceedings. The Green Valley fire and related death of Samuel McPaul were the subject of a further general inquiry into the safety of firefighting vehicles as used by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and Fire and Rescue New South Wales. And as outlined earlier today, these submissions are limited to the cause and origin of the Green Wattle Creek fire. Or rather the Green Valley fire. There is no doubt that from evidence adduced during the inquiry that the Green Valley Talmalmo fire originated in an area bounded by the Woomera National Park, a private property named Avoca, and a pine plantation owned by Hume Forests Limited. The fire had ignited from a lightning strike in the dense native bushland of the Woomera National Park. The Green Valley Talmalmo fire burned for approximately 8 weeks. The evidence demonstrated that the first 3 days of the fire were the most significant. The fire travelled at an astonishing pace, fed by dry fuel loads, fanned by unfavourable weather conditions, and further worsened by its own fire-generated pyrocumulus cloud, which is now displayed on the screen. And the effects of that overturned a rural fire service vehicle on the 30th of December 2019, tragically killing volunteer RFS firefighter Samuel McPaul and injuring his colleague Rodney O'Keefe. Overall, the fire impacted an area of approximately 46,000 hectares of publicly and privately owned land. Approximately 106 structures were destroyed or damaged by the fire, including 14 homes which were destroyed in the townships of Gingelic, Orney and Talmalmo. There were also injuries sustained to other New South Wales RFS firefighters and significant impact in relation to the destruction of pine plantation and associated machinery owned by Hume Forests Limited. Turning to a chronology of the events drawn from the evidence the court received within the coronial brief of evidence, which included witness and civilian statements, RFS lightning strike data, mapping and operational documents, photographs and video footage, and weather data from the Bureau of Meteorology. This chronology further draws upon the oral evidence of Detective Sergeant Hassan, I think it's Alcanzar, team leader at the Arson Unit State Crime Command, in place of the officer in charge of the fire inquiry, Detective Senior Constable Blanche, Detective Sergeant Dane Kremers, RFS Fire Investigator Mr Angus Bullow, all of whom gave evidence on the 14th of September 2021 and RFS member Mr. Mark Reeves, who gave evidence on 14 September 2021. This chronology does not purport to be an exhaustive account, but it is given so that given that the inquiry is limited to the cause and origin of the fire, it will focus upon those matters with only a brief recitation of the fire's progress until the fire was declared out. On the 29th of December 2019, thunderstorm activity occurred over the Woolmoongama National Park and surrounding areas. Local residents Kelly and Eves Sheetler, who live on River Road, Talmalmo, received notifications on a lightning strike app that indicated that there were 3 strikes at 4:19 p.m, 4:20 p.m, and 4:28 p.m. in the general area bordering the Avoca property, the Pine Plantation and Woolmoongama National Park. As part of the investigation conducted by Detective Senior Constable Blanche, GPAT's data was obtained in relation to lightning strikes on the afternoon of Sunday, 29 December 2019. The data revealed that 2 lightning strikes occurred at 4:28 p.m. within the vicinity of where the Green Valley Talmalmo fire is believed to have originated. The fire was first observed by Eves Sheetler, who drove out on motorbike to the locations of where the lightning strikes had hit. He witnessed a column of smoke rising to the north of his home in general proximity to the Avoca property. At approximately 5:04 p.m, a 000 call was made by Kelly Sheetler. At 5:06 p.m, the call was logged by the New South Wales RFS as a smoke sighting incident, and units were deployed to the fire scene. According to the oral evidence of Detective Sergeant Elkanan, the fire had not taken a run at that point. At approximately 6:15 p.m, Parks Victoria captured an aerial photograph of the fire in its infancy. The latitude and longitude from the photograph would later assist Angus Bullough, RFS fire investigator, to narrow down the likely area of origin for the fire's ignition. Attempts were made to contain the fire. RFS firefighter Mark Reeves gave oral evidence that he and neighbour Neil Kelly were the first to arrive at the fire grounds in the late afternoon of 29 December 2019, having received a notification from the RFS. At that stage, the fire was progressing downslope in a northeasterly direction and was approximately 10 acres in size with a 2-metre flame height. Arriving at north of the Avoca property, Mark Reeves and Neil Kelly attempted to contain the fire using a 400-litre tank from their ute and rake hose. Mr. Reeves described the terrain as rough, hilly, steep and inaccessible to vehicles. Other RFS vehicles arrived on scene half an hour later. The situation report for 6:34 p.m. indicated that 20 RFS field personnel were assigned to that fire. In the late afternoon, between 3 p.m. and 8 p.m, weather conditions at the time the RFS attended the fire ground were described as dry, with relative low humidity and light to moderate southwest winds up to 15 kilometres per hour, with temperatures reaching 38.3 degrees. These weather conditions continued to midnight when the wind speed dropped to calm. Mr. Reeves indicated that the fire was reasonably quiet due to night damp when he left the scene at around 10 or 11 o'clock that evening. Bulldozers were deployed through the night in an attempt to place a brake around the fire's edge. The evidence was that there were certain tricky areas where the bulldozers could not access. An RFS situation report reported that by 11:03 p.m, the fire was mapped as spreading in various directions and was at that stage approximately 20 hectares in size. On the morning of 30 December 2019, the weather conditions had dramatically deteriorated, with prevailing north-northwest winds picking up. Mr. Reeves returned to the scene with Mr. Kelly with a 1,000-litre RFS tanker. He described that the fire had grown, but was confident that it would be contained. An RFS situation report for 7:35 a.m. indicated that the fire had grown to 45 hectares in size. Mr. Reeves told the court that it was difficult to find an RFS crew because of the other fires burning across the state, which said something about the broader context within which the response to the Green Valley Talmalmo fire was placed. By the early afternoon, the weather conditions had further deteriorated, with spotting observed ahead of the fire front. Evidence from the Bureau of Meteorology was that the weather was very hot and dry, with northwesterly winds averaging 30 to 40 kilometres per hour, gusting up to 54 kilometres per hour. Maximum temperatures in the area were close to 40 degrees, and relative humidity dropped below 10% in the late afternoon. Between 2 to 3 p.m, the Green Valley Talmalmo fire breached the containment line on a northeastern front and was expected to encroach upon properties and townships of Jingellic and Talmalmo, such that crews were tasked by RFS Fire Control to head to the River Road and prioritise the protection of property and assets. The RFS Northwest Culkin 2 Alpha fire truck and its crew of 3, which included firefighter Samuel McPaul, was deployed to the Lightwood property in Jingellic, along with a number of other RFS vehicles. The Green Valley Talmalmo fire had made a progression south towards the Jingellic area on the northern bank of the Murray River. Detective Sergeant Elkasan told the court that after about 3 p.m, the wind velocity had picked up, developing into a fire-generated vortex, which is an upright column of rapidly rotating air which form over fire grounds due to the interactions between the fire, topography, and ambient weather conditions, is now displayed on screen. A report produced by the Bureau of Meteorology for this inquiry explained that the environment surrounding Green Valley was favourable for the development of fire-generated vortexes, or FGVs, due to an unstable atmosphere, the presence of high-based pyrocumulus clouds, indicating strong updrafts above high-intensity fire activity, moderate winds above the surface, and the location of the fire in the lee side of the ridgeline. In the period up to 5:30 p.m, the fire's activity escalated, with the main head fire moving over the ridgeline into Green Valley. This is now shown on screen. At around 5:45 p.m, the fire FGV descended on the Lightwood property and impacted the 10-tonne Isuzu RFS Northwest Culkin 2 Alpha fire truck, causing it to roll over, leading to the death of Samuel McPaul. The evidence from the Bureau was that the truck was hit by winds in excess of 220 kilometres per hour, consistent with wind speeds of an enhanced Fujita scale Category 3 tornado. The report noted that it was possible that the winds reached up to 320 kilometres per hour. These destructive winds were short-lived, lasting a few minutes only. The tragic circumstances surrounding the death of Samuel McPaul were addressed in the inquest into his death. Separate submissions will address the outcome of that inquest today. The fire continued to burn intensely, spotting ahead of the fire front. An RFS line scan image taken at 6:12 p.m. showed that the Green Valley Talmalmo fire then progressed southeasterly, crossing the Murray River into Victoria in a separate area of fire before merging with the main fire later that evening. By 10:17 p.m, the fire was mapped as having spread 24 kilometres to the southeast over the 24-hour period. On 31 December 2019, the Green Valley Talmalmo fire commenced another significant run, progressing a staggering 45 kilometres southeast since 9:34 p.m. the previous evening. At 4:30 p.m, then Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons AO AFSM made a declaration under Section 44 of the Rural Fires Act, giving the RFS control of firefighting efforts in the Greater Hume local government area. Over the course of the next 4 days, the Green Valley Talmalmo fire was mapped as spreading small distances of up to 5 kilometres in different directions. On 4 January 2020, the fire commenced another significant run, with an area of fire near Jingellic mapped as spreading 18 kilometres to the east-southeast. During this spread, the fire had coalesced with the East Orny Creek fire, and at 8:06 p.m, the fires were subsequently mapped as part of the Duns Road fire. Over the course of the remaining 45 days, the Green Valley Talmalmo fire was mapped as spreading relatively short distances in various directions, or mapped as not spreading, both in New South Wales and Victoria. On 10:38 p.m. on 19 February 2020, the Green Valley Talmalmo fire was authorised out. Turning to cause and origin, evidence as to cause and origin was centred around the expert opinions expressed by Angus Bullough, RFS fire investigator, and Detective Acting Sergeant Dane Kremers of the New South Wales Police Forensic and Evidence and Technical Services Command. Having had regard to the latitude and longitude from the photograph taken by Parks Victoria and lightning strike data, Mr. Bullough conducted an aerial inspection on 12 January 2020 over the general area of origin. From the air, Mr. Bullough observed advancing fire runs to both the east and west and identified a particular tree that appeared to have been struck by lightning. Mr. Bullough told the court that he conducted a ground-based investigation on 12 January 2020, having cleared access to the site the previous day through extremely steep and rugged terrain. The investigation was scheduled to commence 3 January 2020. However, dangers associated with reduced visibility, unpredictable fire conditions, extreme weather conditions, including agency priorities, meant that the investigation was postponed. Mr. Bullough outlined in oral evidence and in his statement that he adopted standard RFS methodology to confirm the general area of origin and to identify the specific area of origin. That is, he conducted an examination around the burnt ground in the general area of origin in a counterclockwise direction and then in a clockwise direction to establish fire runs. Once the fire run was established, he followed a serpentine pattern to examine macro indicators of advancing, backing or lateral fire movement. Mr. Bullough informed the court that there were conflicting macro indicators in the general area of origin, which caused him to rely on micro indicators. The observed micro indicators, including angle of char on grass stems, sooting and staining, ash deposits, and evidence of lightning strike, led to the identification of a specific area of origin. Once satisfied of the specific area of origin, Mr. Bullough applied the same methodology to establish the point of origin. In oral evidence, Mr. Bullough informed the court that the likely point of origin for the ignition of the fire was a tree bearing the hallmarks of lightning strike. He observed that a particular tree had suffered from a natural force such to have caused the bough to break near its base. Evidence of fragmented and splintered wood was also observed, pointing to a natural rather than a mechanical break. Mr. Bullough told the court that a very small gouge mark was observed near the base of the tree, and the tree was observed to have been burnt externally with no evidence of the internals affected by fire, such as could have weakened the tree, causing it to fall after the fact. In his experience, such features indicate that the tree had been struck by lightning. Detective Sergeant Dane Kremers provided a statement and oral evidence to the court that the most likely cause of ignition for the fire was lightning. He attended the fireground on 14 January 2020 to conduct an examination of the suspected area of origin, following 2 earlier unsuccessful attempts to access the fireground on 6 and 9 January 2020. Detective Kremers informed the court that he sourced information from observations of first responders and lightning data from the RFS to narrow down the general area of origin. He was unable to identify a specific point of origin due to conflicting fire indicators caused by a secondary crossover of the fire front on the original fireground in the opposite direction, which had altered existing fire indicators and patterns. Detective Kremers provided evidence in relation to 19 lightning strikes recorded by GPATs in the area on 29 December 2019 between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. Of those, 2 lightning strikes were recorded at 4:28 p.m. within 200 metres of the initial reported fire ground. It is his evidence that the most probable cause of the ignition was lightning. He concluded that the timing of the lightning strikes in relation to the reported observations of the fire in its incipient stages, the report from the crew of the Lankeys Creek Brigade from their initial attendance at the scene, and the timing of the photograph provided by Parks Victoria, together with Detective Kremer's own aerial inspection on 15 January 2020, confirmed to him that the likely area of origin was within dense native bushland on the eastern side of a steep slope in the southwestern area of the Woolmagama National Park. Finally, other causes of the fire were excluded for want of evidence of any competent ignition source identified in the remote terrain of the general area of origin. In terms of the cause and origin of that fire, it's submitted that the cause of the Green Valley Talmalmo fire was a lightning strike to a tree on 29 December 2019 at 4:28 p.m. and the origin of the fire was in an area bounded by Woolmagama National Park, a private property named Avoca, and a pine plantation owned by Humes Forest Limited. Finally, those assisting the court wish to express their gratitude to those who have aided and provided information to Your Honour to assist with this coronial inquiry into the cause and origin of the Green Valley Talmalmo fire. May it please the court.
Thank you, Mr Wilcox. Might take the morning adjournment.
Yes, Your Honour.
Resume at 12:10. Yes, Mr Wilcox.
Your Honour, turning to the inquest into the death of Samuel McPaul, closing submissions. Sam tragically died while fighting the Green Valley fire on the Lightwood property in the Gingelic area on 30 December 2019. Pictured now is a satellite image of the Lightwood and surrounding properties. Samuel McPaul was 29 years old when he died sometime after 5:45 p.m. on 30 December 2019 while fighting fires in the Gingelic area with the Northwest Culkin Brigade. And Your Honour just saw some pictures shared by Mr McPaul's family. The crew with Mr McPaul on the Northwest Culkin truck on the afternoon of 30 December 2019 included Captain Andrew Goody and Rodney O'Keefe. Mr Goody drove the truck while Mr O'Keefe and Mr McPaul were in the crew area of the truck, ready for firefighting. The truck was an RFS Category 2 truck, a 2001 Isuzu twin cabin. It was set up for grass firefighting with a tank of 1,800 litres, and the evidence was that this tank was between 50 to 90% full of water. On 30 December 2019, under extreme weather conditions, a fire known as the Green Valley Fire spread to Gingelic, impacting properties including a rural property at number 3852 River Road, Gingelic, named Lightwood. Following further extreme deterioration in weather conditions, including the formation of a pyrocumulus column at the Lightwood property, the RFS truck rolled over. And there's an image on screen of that truck. Mr McPaul was located by Andrew Good and Rodney O'Keefe on the ground, having likely fallen under the middle section of the RFS truck after it rolled over. Turning to a chronology, the cause and origin inquiry into the Green Valley fire with by way of separate closing submissions earlier today. Those submissions, it was submitted that the cause of the Green Valley Talmalmo fire was a lightning strike to a tree on 29 December 2019 at 4:28 p.m. and the origin of the fire was in an area bounded by Woolmagama National Park, private property named Avoca, and a pine plantation owned by Humes Forest Limited. But around 3:30 p.m. on 30 December 2019, Andrew Goody, captain of the Northwest Culkin Brigade, was notified to arrange for a tanker with a crew ready for firefighting efforts that day. Due to the difficulties encountered in obtaining a crew over the Christmas New Year period, he contacted Mr McPaul to join himself with Rodney O'Keefe. Mr Goody said that Mr McPaul did not hesitate when asked if he would join the truck, and Mr Goody said that this was the kind of man that Mr McPaul was, a community-minded man who was eager to help. Mr Goody received a call in the afternoon of 30 December 2019 from Peter Webb, his group captain, to travel to the Gingelic area and proceed up River Road to attend property protection. Mr Goody said the RFS truck was stopped and the three men put on their personal protective equipment before proceeding down River Road. Lightwood was the first farm that they came to, and they could see the fire encroaching upon it. The Lightwood property in Gingelic is owned by Andrew Hicks. The property was approximately 400 metres off River Road and included a residence and farm buildings. Andrew Hicks said that by mid-afternoon on 30 December 2019, there were around 3 to 4 fire trucks in or around his property fighting the fire. Peter Taylor, or Jed Taylor as he's known, was a member of Lankeys Creek Brigade and provided details relating to the Lankeys Creek Brigade's attendance at Lightwood around 3 p.m. that day. He recalled the RFS communications requesting as many trucks as possible to provide support in the area. At that point in time, he said that the wind was blowing in 3 different directions on different sides of the mountain. In his statement, Mr Taylor described how he could see and hear trucks coming and going from all directions along River Road. He said he could see 3 trucks at the base of Mount Angelic on the eastern side of the property known as Lightwood. They were parked at the location, and he observed that they were waiting for fire to arrive. Mr. Taylor said that the fire was heading south, and the concern at that point for him was for the 5 properties at the base of the mountain. Mr. Goody said that when the Northwest Culkin truck arrived at the Lightwood property with Mr. McPaul on board, there were 2 other RFS vehicles in the immediate area. He said that they entered the paddock and were tasked with dealing with spot fires. He also said that they considered it safe to enter the paddock because the fuel load was low and the ground was flat. At around 4:30 p.m, the Glen Manus Brigade arrived at the front gate of the Lightwood property and attended to a spot fire in the paddock. Scott Anderson, a member of the Glen Manus Brigade, said he watched as his crew fought one of the spot fires from the front gate of the paddock, and he could see the Northwest Culkin truck fighting spot fires at the base of the hill. The evidence of Scott Anderson was that the Northwest Culkin truck, with Mr. McPaul on board, continued to fight spot fires in the minutes before a fire-generated vortex descended on the paddock. An image is shown that was provided in the inquiry. At this point, the Glen Manus Brigade drove towards the gate of the main entrance to Lightwood, and as Glen Manus Brigade drove through the paddock gate, Scott Anderson said he felt, in his words, the tornado drop. By around 4:30 or 5 p.m, the owner of Lightwood, Mr. Hicks, recalled there being around 6 or 7 RFS vehicles at his property. At that stage, he similarly recalled the fire heading down into the base of the Gingelic Mountain and described the impending fire as an inferno. Around 5:23 p.m, an emergency weather warning was broadcast for the Green Valley Fire on 30 December 2019, indicating that the fire was a pyrocumulus column that had been created by the fire, or that there was such a column. The column was described as unstable, with there being a possibility that it could collapse. If that was to occur, it was predicted that the fire would extend in all directions with erratic fire behaviour and extreme winds. Mr. John Hicks, the RFS captain of Group 5 in the Albury area, Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. Goody provided oral evidence to Your Honour that, for one reason or another, they did not recall receiving that emergency weather warning on the ground at that time. Around 5:30 p.m, Mr. Taylor saw spinning smoke on the mountainside and called fire comms on radio to indicate that it was his view that the fire tornado was happening. Evidence suggests that around 5:45 p.m. that day, a fire-generated vortex, also known as an FGV, descended on the property known as Lightwood near Gingelic. Mr. O'Keefe, member of the Northwest Culkin Brigade, provided evidence detailing that while the Culkin Brigade drove through to paddock, it was his view that the vehicle was travelling at about 10 to 15 kilometres per hour. The ground was covered in short grass, and he wasn't feeling any bumps or jolts in the truck. Mr. O'Keefe, Mr. Goody and Mr. McPaul were still travelling at the same speed around the property before a decision was made to get out of the paddock following the fire spotting at the northern end, with the wind picking up and heading in the direction of the Northwest Culkin truck. It was Mr. O'Keefe's estimation that the truck would have been travelling around 20 to 25 kilometres per hour, heading directly to the property's gate. At this point, Mr. O'Keefe detailed how the paddock seemed then to explode into flames. As he looked around, he recalled seeing fire coming from all directions. As the vehicle headed towards the gate, the winds increased in speed, and the fire was said to have travelled from around 100 metres away to the truck in a matter of seconds. Mr. McPaul and Mr. O'Keefe went into the crew protection area to shield themselves, and moments later the truck was on its roof. Mr. Taylor said that he recalled seeing Mr. McPaul standing on the back of the Northwest Culkin truck in the personnel area moments before the wind increased and the truck flipped. In oral evidence, Mr. Goody suggested that he, Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. McPaul arrived at the Lightwood paddock around 5:50 p.m. As indicated earlier, the paddock was flat and tidy, and he said he could drive in the paddock comfortably, and initially there wasn't any fire spotting. Soon after entering the paddock, the men decided to leave, and headed back towards the home on the property as they were likely needed more help up there. At this point, the winds picked up and the wall of flames presented itself. Mr. Goody described everything being on fire. He said the truck, which was carrying Mr. McPaul directly behind him on the driver's side, was very close to the gate of the property, about 50 to 100 metres away, and they were nearly out of the paddock. Mr. Goody described to Your Honour how he thought he was driving through a wall of flames, but instead suggested that he actually drove into the middle of a fire tornado. He recalled telling Mr. McPaul and Mr. O'Keefe to get down and take cover, and it was obvious to him that everything was on fire, describing his surroundings as very red and hot. He said that it all happened very quickly, in a matter of seconds, as he was flung around the truck cabin as the truck overturned. John Hicks provided oral evidence in relation to the deteriorating conditions, including strong winds and darkness, before he received a call from Mr. Goody seeking assistance following the vehicle rollover. Image shown on screen was taken by Mr. Hicks. He was made aware that there had been some injuries to the Northwest Culkin crew. Mr. Hicks then put in an emergency call over the PMR radio. At 5:51 p.m, the fire-generated vortex had swept through the property, and after that point, police were informed and immediately responded following reports of the RFS truck rollover at Lightwood. They were already in the Gingelic area, assisting the community with the fire response and evacuation. En route to the property, the fire continued to burn on both sides of the highway, and smoke limited visibility. Investigating police encountered an RFS truck on the road and were informed that one of the RFS officers had been burned and one individual was trapped under the truck. Police arrived on the scene and Senior Constable Bavister provided a statement detailing how he saw Rodney O'Keefe attending to an individual under the truck near the crew refuge area behind the cabin. Andrew Goody used a hose to mist water over Mr. O'Keefe. Mr. O'Keefe survived the incident, but suffering serious injuries including cracked ribs and burns to his body. Mr. McPaul was located deceased by Mr. Goody and Mr. O'Keefe on the ground under the middle section of the vehicle after the rollover. Evidence provided to the court detailed that access to the crew refuge area of the truck was basically impossible at that particular point in time, as the primary access doors on both sides were jammed into the ground and unable to be opened. The court received into evidence a volume comprising 645 pages, including statements from members of the police force, RFS, civilian witnesses, and several photographs and maps, as well as expert certificates from New South Wales Police and an ICAM investigation report. While the officer in charge, Detective Senior Constable Paul Blanche, was unavailable to give evidence, the court heard from Acting Inspector Hassan El-Kanza on 14 September 2021. On 15 September 2021, oral evidence was given from RFS Group Captain Matthew Hicks, two RFS volunteers Rodney O'Keefe and Andrew Goody, and Senior Constable Mark Lester. On 16 September 2021, Your Honour heard from Sergeant Derek Fenton, Forensic Accident Investigator Mark Sculthorpe, ICAM Lead Investigator Ken Edwards, and Dr. Micah Peace, a Senior Research Scientist with the Bureau of Meteorology. Sam's mother, Chris, and wife, Megan, also provided family statements following the close of evidence for the benefit of Your Honour. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, Your Honour, holding an inquest into the death of a person is required to make findings as to the identity of the person who died, when and where they died, and the manner and cause of death. In addition, Your Honour may make recommendations considerable necessary or desirable in relation to matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future arising out of the death in question. In this inquest, Mr. McPaul's identity is known, as is the date and place of his death. For this reason, the inquest into Mr. McPaul's death focused on the manner and cause of his death. Mr. McPaul's death was also considered as part of a specific case study exploring issues concerning vehicle design and safety of RFS and Fire and Rescue New South Wales assets. The hearings for that case study were held in March 2023, and a summary of the evidence from the case study and proposed recommendations was the subject of separate written and oral submissions delivered today. In his written statement, Senior Constable Mark Lester from the Forensic Evidence and Technical Services Command of New South Wales Police details how he attended the scene at 9:10 p.m. on the evening of 30 December 2019. He said that at the time of his examination, it was dark, smoky, and there were active fires in the surrounding hills. The paddock area was burnt out and the ground covered in ash. The rolled over truck was facing a northeasterly direction and was approximately 80 to 100 metres from the gate to the Lightwood property. Senior Constable Lester examined the RFS truck, lying upside down on its roof and slightly tilted to its near side. The windows were smashed and the damage was consistent with an offside rollover. He could not find any indicators of excessive speed or improper use of the vehicle causative of the rollover. He concluded that the vehicle was suddenly pushed by force to the western side of the vehicle, causing it to roll sideways. Senior Constable Lester told the court that he observed Mr. McPaul pinned under the RFS truck, deceased as a result of the vehicle rollover. Following his examination, he concluded that Mr. McPaul was wearing appropriate RFS protective gear at the time of the incident. Senior Constable Peter Kleinig, a mechanical examiner in the Engineering Investigation Unit of New South Wales Police, was engaged to conduct a mechanical examination of the Isuzu Model 8F903 medium rigid truck bearing RFS registration, which was the subject vehicle of the rollover. Senior Constable Kleinig was of the opinion that no mechanical defects or component failure which could have contributed to the collision occurred. All the damage detected on the vehicle was consistent with the incident. In his report, Senior Constable Kleinig provided some recommendations in respect of the vehicle rollover. It was recommended that RFS vehicles be fitted with rollover protection structure, ROPS, and falling object protective structure, FOPS. These systems are currently fitted in vehicles involved in other industries such as mining, agriculture, and building. It was noted that these structures would only be effective if occupants in the vehicle wore a seatbelt. Sergeant Derek Fenton of the Forensic Evidence and Technical Support Command at New South Wales Police was also engaged to provide a vehicle collision expert certificate in respect of the RFS vehicle rollover in Jingellic, which occurred on the 30th of December. After reviewing images of the scene and based on his training and expertise, he was of the view that the vehicle rolled onto its right-hand side before coming to rest on its roof. He opined that the incident was not provoked or caused by driver input, either excessive steering or speed. During oral evidence, Sergeant Fenton also eliminated the topography causing the vehicle to roll over. Consultant, motor vehicle crash reconstructionist and forensic investigator Mark Scullthorpe provided evidence that the roof was crushed, more so on the near side or passenger side of the vehicle. He noted that dirt had been snared in different parts of the truck, including directly being wedged into the frame of the bull bar on the vehicle, suggesting it had made contact with the ground. He was of the view that the rear of the vehicle was lifted from the ground, the vehicle spun on its front and rotated, and dumped upside down on the ground by an incredible force. Mr. Kenneth Edwards, Safety Supervisor in the Safety Unit for the New South Wales RFS, was tasked with undertaking an investigation in relation to 3 incidents that occurred in the Jingellic area on 30 December 2019, or the incident rather, and produced a Level 3 Incident Cause Analysis Method, or ICAM, investigation report to the court. In relation to another incident on the same afternoon involving an RFS vehicle rolling over, he concluded that the RFS vehicle likely rolled over as a result of severe wind caused by a fire-generated vortex. In relation to the incident involving Mr. McPaul, Mr. Edwards indicated that it was prudent for the RFS truck to be in that paddock with the absence of a fire-generated vortex. He is of the understanding that there is no way specifically to predict whether conditions will become an FGV event or where that FGV event might be. Dr. Micah Peace, Senior Research Scientist at the Bureau of Meteorology, provided oral evidence to the court detailing how the atmosphere became more unstable. In respect of the Green Valley fire, Mr. Peace did not locate any lightning strikes over the fire, and no cloud reaching sufficient depth to be categorised as pyrocumulonimbus cloud on 30 December 2019. He did note that there was a deep towering pyrocumulus cloud which developed very rapidly that afternoon over the Green Valley fire, which could be seen on both the radar and satellite observations. However, as there was no lightning strikes associated with the Green Valley fire, it cannot be categorised as a fire-generated thunderstorm or pyrocumulonimbus. Yes. In respect of the winds, Dr. Peace concluded in her report, and I apologise for misgendering the doctor, that the events were consistent with an EF3 tornado and potentially stronger winds up to an EF4 tornado due to the size and weight of the fire truck. This includes winds of up to possibly 266 to 320 kilometres per hour. In oral evidence, Dr. Peace opined that the destructive winds on the later afternoon of 30 December 2019 in the Green Valley area would be considered a highly rare weather event. Turning to manner and cause of death, the pathologist at autopsy concluded that Mr. Paul's cause of death was a traumatic asphyxia or crush asphyxia. The physical injuries he sustained were consistent with having suffered the trauma of a vehicle rollover. Following an autopsy performed by forensic pathologist Melissa Thompson on 3 January 2020, the direct cause of death was determined as traumatic asphyxia or crash asphyxia. On this basis, it's submitted, Your Honour, that the cause of death can be recorded as traumatic asphyxia. It's noted that Mr. McPaul died while fighting the Green Valley fire on a Lightwood property in the Gingelic area on 30 December 2019. At approximately 5:45 p.m, a fire-generated vortex impacted with the RFS truck carrying Mr. McPaul, causing it to overturn. Accordingly, in our submission, Your Honour would make the following findings under Section 81 of the Coroners Act: that Samuel McPaul died while fighting the Green Valley fire on a Lightwood property in the Gingelic area on 30 December 2019. At a time approximately after 5:45 p.m, a fire-generated vortex impacted with the truck, causing it to overturn. The cause of Samuel's death was traumatic asphyxia as a result of the accident. A picture's been brought on screen of Sam, Megan and Chris. Those assisting the court express sincere thanks to Sam's wife, Megan, mother Chris and Sam's extended family and RFS colleagues for their willingness to participate in and assist with the coronial investigation into the tragic death of Sam. The council assisting team express our condolences to the McPaul family for the loss of their beloved husband, son and friend in such devastating circumstances. Please, the court.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox.
Your Honour, I propose to address Your Honour firstly in relation to Your Honour's inquiry into the Kian Road South Arm fire, followed by the related inquest into the death of Christopher Sava.
Thank you, Mr. Castleton.
Your Honour, these are the closing submissions for the coronial inquiry into the cause and origin of the fire known as the Kian Road South Arm fire. The inquiry has been conducted pursuant to Section 30, subsection 1 of the Coroners Act and is accordingly limited to determining the cause and origin of the fire. The Kian Road fire started in mid-October 2019 and burned in the Nambucca Valley local government area, encompassed within the lands of the Gumbaynggirr people. The Kian Road fire burned for around 10 weeks and eventually merged with other fires, including the Carrai East fire. Christopher Sava, who lived in South Arm, tragically died in connection with the Kian Road fires. Others were seriously injured, including Fire and Rescue New South Wales firefighters Daryl Aldridge and Irene Patchos, to which I've already referred earlier this morning. The Kian Road fire impacted an area of approximately 31,000 hectares, comprising 13,900 hectares of private land, 9,300 hectares of national park and 8,000 hectares of state forest. The fire was ferocious, wreaking havoc and traumatising local residents. The devastation was far-reaching. 64 homes were destroyed and 19 others damaged. The Kian Road fire destroyed or damaged another 150 outbuildings and countless other structures, vehicles, machinery plant, timber equipment and crops. Thanks to the efforts of the New South Wales Rural Fire Service, 184 homes and 203 outbuildings managed to be saved. Many residents who fled their homes to escape the fire returned to find utter devastation and destruction. Whilst evidence in one hearing has been treated as evidence in the other, these closing submissions will address the fire inquiry and related inquest separately, with submissions into the inquest to follow shortly. It is significant to highlight that the Kian Road fire was one of many fires burning across the state of New South Wales during the 2019-2020 bushfire season. As Your Honour is aware, not all fires were reported to Your Honour. Not all fires reported to Your Honour proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin. And of course, Your Honour, not all fires that proceeded to a coronial inquiry into cause and origin continue to further consideration via a general inquiry as part of Your Honour Stage 2 proceedings. The Kian Road fire was the subject of further general inquiry into the safety of firefighting vehicles used by the New South Wales Rural Fire Service and Fire and Rescue New South Wales. These submissions are limited to the cause and origin of the Kian Road fire. A brief chronology of events follows, Your Honour. On 16 October 2019, there were several lightning strikes between the area around Kian Road South Arm, Buckrabendini State Forest and Dungar National Park. Lightning data provided by the RFS showed the sheer degree of lightning activity in the area that day in the vicinity of the suspected general area of origin. On 17 October 2019, Air Observer Andrew Pitson of the National Parks and Wildlife Service took off from Dorrigo in a helicopter to check for new fires given lightning strike activity the day prior. He detected 3 new fires. Mr Pitson captured a photograph, which Your Honour will see shortly, which showed the initial stage of the Kian Road fire burning on private property, south of Upper Buckrabendini Road and east of Kozakai Road in a heavily forested, semi-remote area with steep terrain. Over the course of the day, aircraft were able to slow the spread of the fire, noting that the steep terrain and dry conditions made initial containment difficult. The following day, 18 October 2019, the Kian Road fire spread towards Dungier National Park and Hanging Rock Road, as well as private property along Upper Buckrabendini Road. Fire crews turned their attention to asset protection. Ground crews were supported by aircraft and machinery was brought in to construct hard containment lines to the east, south and west of Kian Road. By 8 a.m. on the 19th of October, the Kian Road fire had burned 140 hectares. Low fuel moisture increased the risk of spotting. By the end of the day, that is 19 October 2019, the Kian Road fire and the Kozakai Road fire to the southwest were being managed together as the Kian Road fire. On 20 October, tactical burns continued with the aim to contain the Kian Road fire within containment lines, and firefighting personnel attempted to create a small perimeter to reduce the risk to the community. At this stage, Your Honour, firefighters were working around the clock in an attempt to execute that strategy. Between 21 and 23 October, the Kian Road fire started to extend laterally along Hanging Rock Road and spread in all directions. On 8 November 2019, treacherous weather conditions in the Nambucca Valley caused extreme and anomalous fire spread. Temperatures soared to 36.5 degrees Celsius with 7% humidity, and gale force winds reached gusts of up to 69 kilometres per hour. The Kian Road fire spread around 13 kilometres to the east in a single day. Tragically, on 8 November 2019, Christopher Sava lost his life in a car accident after the fire impacted South Arm, where he lived. Numerous properties were also destroyed on that day. Over the next 2 weeks, Your Honour, firefighting crews attempted to limit the spread of the Kian Road fire and focused on asset protection by employing a broad containment strategy through a combination of direct, ground and aerial attack. On 10 November, Darryl Aldridge and Irene Patchos were part of a Fire and Rescue New South Wales team that assisted landowners with property protection. On their way out of a property in North Congarini, a fallen tree was blocking the road. Upon embarking from their fire appliance to assist with moving the tree from the road, another large tree struck their vehicle, resulting, as Your Honour knows, in Irene and Daryl suffering serious injuries. On 17 November 2019, RFS fire investigator Ian Cook and his colleague Mark Fulliger attended the private property south of Upper Buckarandini Road, east of Kozakai Road, where Mr Pitson had captured the initial stages of the Kian Road fire. Upon arriving at the property, the RFS fire investigators were directed by landowner Nicholas Graham to a track that would lead them to an area where the fire started. However, they were unable to reach the precise area of origin due to the inaccessible terrain. They followed the track to an area where they observed what was described as a fresh burn area. Mr Cook took photographs of evidence of the fire indicators, including leaf freeze, you want to see there, angle of char, staining, and evidence of the path the fire took. By 21 November, the Kian Road fire had merged with the northeast portion of the Karai East fire. On 27 December, the Kian Road fire was formally merged with the Karai East fire and was declared officially out on that date, 2.5 months after it had initially started. In oral evidence on the 10th of March last year, Detective Senior Constable Priest outlined the steps he took in investigating the cause and origin of the Kian Road fire. These included obtaining lightning data and witness statements, including a statement from Mr Pitson and evidence from the RFS. He also tasked Senior Constable Justin Powell, a member of the New South Wales Police Forensic Evidence and Technical Services Command, FETS, to investigate the cause and origin of the Kian Road fire. Senior Constable Powell also investigated the cause and origin of the Kozakai Road fire. Senior Constable Powell concluded that the Kian Road fire and the Kozakai Road fire were caused by lightning strike. This was following his review of the lightning strike data and the witness statement provided by Mr Pitson. RFS investigator Ian Cook came to a similar conclusion to that of Senior Constable Powell, that the Kian Road fire was likely caused by lightning strike on 16 October 2019. Mr Cook observed from his ground-based investigation that the remote, steep and isolated location restricted any public access. He could not reach the precise point of origin due to the steepness of the terrain. Sadly, RFS fire investigator Ian Cook passed away and Senior Constable Powell was unable to give evidence in relation to the Kian Road fire due to health reasons. In relation to the area of origin of the Kian Road fire, Detective Senior Constable Priest confirmed that a general area of origin for the ignition could be discerned by Senior Constable Powell, but not a specific point of origin. The general area of origin, Your Honour, was south of Upper Buckarandini Road and east of Kozakai Road on private property. Senior Sergeant Scott Gain also gave oral evidence on the 10th of March last year. Senior Sergeant Gain was involved with coordinating assistance for forensic resources in relation to requests that came in from several New South Wales police districts. Part of this work included arranging for forensic staff to undertake building impact assessments on affected properties. Senior Sergeant Gain did not undertake any site inspections in relation to the Kian Road fire. He liaised with Senior Constable Powell throughout his investigation into the cause and origin of the Kian Road fire and reviewed his statement at the conclusion of the investigation. Senior Sergeant Gain conceded that the exact cause and origin of the Kian Road fire, as well as the Kozakai Road fire, was unable to be determined, but the evidence indicated that the ignition was likely to have been caused by a lightning strike. Senior Sergeant Gain also agreed that only a general area of origin could be discerned as opposed to a specific point of origin due to the rugged and remote terrain in relation to the Kian Road fire, as well as the Kozakai Road fire. It is submitted, Your Honour, that the cause of the Kian Road fire was by lightning on 16 October 2019, and the general area of origin was south of Upper Buckarabendini Road and east of Kozakai Road, and Your Honour will see there displayed now an aerial photograph identifying the private property and that remote and rugged terrain where the ignition is likely to occur. Finally, Your Honour, can I indicate that those assisting, Your Honour, express their thanks to those who have aided and provided information to the court and to Your Honour to assist with the Coronial inquiry into the cause and origin of the Kian Road fire. Your Honour, that leaves the remaining closing submissions into the death of Christopher Sava, SAVVA. On 8 November 2019, under extreme fire weather conditions, the Kian Road fire impacted the community of South Arm, where Christopher Sava lived with his partner, Amanda or Mandy Brady. Chris was much loved by family and friends. Chris had 3 adult children, Bianca Waters, Amanda Griggs and Nicholas Griggs. I take this opportunity, Your Honour, to welcome any family members who are watching these proceedings today. At around 5 p.m. on 8 November 2019, Chris's car rolled off a steep embankment near his home in the vicinity of 1678 South Arm Road, South Arm. Chris was discovered deceased in his car the following day, 9 November 2019. He had died from injuries sustained in the accident. He was, Your Honour, 63 years of age. On 8 November, the Kian Road fire was burning out of control and moved quickly under unfavourable weather conditions and travelled, as I said a moment ago, Your Honour, 13 kilometres eastward within a single day. At around midday, Chris and Mandy were at home on their property. According to Mandy, Chris was at the back of the property attending to preparations for the fire. In the early afternoon, Mandy heard what she described as a loud wind roar. She turned around and noticed that the sky was black. She yelled out to Chris, who came to the front of the house, where he said to Mandy, "Well, it's here." A helicopter had flown over the house at that time, indicating that they should evacuate. Mandy had observed large flames in the bushland and trees directly across the road from their house. As the fire appeared to be fast approaching, they made the decision to evacuate and got into their car and drove to check on their neighbour, Alfred Teaser. Mandy recalls seeing spot fires everywhere in the paddocks and in the bush all around them. On reaching Alfred's property, Mandy said that Chris wanted to return to his property to attempt to save the house. Mandy did not want Chris to stay and defend the property, but Chris wanted to stay. Alfred had also decided to stay to defend his home. Alfred and Chris remained at their respective properties to defend them, while their partners, Mandy and Marie, left the area together by car. This was, sadly, the last time Mandy saw Chris alive. Chris then visited another neighbour, John Petit, out of concern for his safety. John left his property with Chris due to the approaching fire. At 2:35 p.m, the fire in proximity to Chris's property was intense. Chris and John worked together to put out spot fires and managed to save Chris's property. John travelled back to his own property to find it destroyed. John and Chris then travelled to check on their neighbour, Anton. Anton lived on the same parcel of land as Chris and Mandy. At some point in the late afternoon, Chris went inside Anton's house to recuperate once the fire front had passed through. Anton then drove Chris back to his house. Anton recalled that on the way they witnessed a small bridge, known as Murray's Bridge, on fire. The bridge was near Chris's property. Anton had suggested that they save the bridge, but Chris did not appear to have the energy to do so given the events of the day. At Chris's request, Anton dropped Chris at his property in the front paddock. Anton recalled that Chris said that he then wanted to leave his property to see Mandy because there was no water and no power at his house. This was the last time Anton saw Chris. At approximately 4 p.m. or 4:30 p.m, Anton left Chris's property and drove down South Arm Road towards Jaspers Creek Road with the intention to check on his ex-partner's property. Along the way, Anton saw that a small fallen tree branch was blocking the roadway leading to Murray's Bridge. He stopped to move the tree as much as he could with his hands. He was unable to manoeuvre his car around the tree by driving about a metre down an embankment and returning to the road. Anton believes this to be the location where Chris's car was later found. Anton continued down and over Murray's Bridge, which was still burning but able to be crossed, and was able to visit his ex-partner's property. Approximately 10 minutes later, Anton returned back towards his property. Murray's Bridge at that point was still burning. On the return journey, Anton saw that a whole tree had fallen across the road at the same location where the small tree had fallen. He stopped and used a rope to tow the tree to the side of the road. In oral evidence, Anton stated that he did not see Chris's car on the road at that time. Having later been informed by investigating police of the location of Chris's car when it rolled down the embankment, Anton believed that the car's location was approximately 3 metres from where the tree had fallen. After removing the large tree, Anton drove back to Chris's house. He found that Chris was no longer at his property and his car was gone. Throughout that evening and the following morning, Mandy called Chris several times but could not get through to him. Mobile phone records show that 22 calls were placed to Chris's mobile phone from 3:57 p.m. on 8 November to 10:32 a.m. on 10 November. Call records show that these calls were not transmitted until 1:31 p.m. on 10 November 2019, likely due to telecommunication issues. On 9 November, Chris was found in his car. And Your Honour sees now an aerial photograph which depicts the crash site and the location of that site relative to Chris's residence and Murray Bridge, which I think Your Honour can just see there in the bottom right. Chris was first located by Darren Dutton and his colleagues from the Nambucca Council. While clearing the trees from the roadway, they found Chris's car at the bottom of an embankment, and on inspection of the vehicle found Chris. They contacted emergency services. At around 8:30 to 9 a.m. that day, Mandy returned to Alfred's house with his wife Marie. They had heard that Chris had saved his house and expected to see him at Alfred's home, but he was not there. Alfred told them that Murray's Bridge had burned out, and that may be the reason he could not get there. In oral evidence, Alfred stated that he and Mandy drove towards Murray's Bridge, but were unable to cross it, and so walked along a bush track on the other side of the road and noticed Chris's car through the scrub. When they approached the car, they were confronted with the same scene as the Nambucca Council officers. At 9:40 a.m, the officer in charge of the investigation, Detective Senior Constable Justin Simpson, responded to the emergency call and attended the scene via a dirt track to the right of Murray's Bridge. In oral evidence, Detective Senior Constable Simpson described that the bushland surrounding the area was completely burnt out and there was still quite a lot of smoke in the area, including spot fires and fallen trees. He observed Murray's Bridge to be completely burnt out, with the exception of its supporting pylons, which were at that time still on fire. Later that morning, at about 11 a.m, Detective Senior Constable Justin Welsh also attended the scene to conduct further investigations. On close inspection of the car, he saw that the windows were wound down and the ignition was on. The manual transmission was in the neutral position. The tyres were deflated and were no longer on their wheel rims. Detective Senior Constable Welsh did not see any damage to the front of the vehicle to suggest that it had collided with any object. Your Honour received a volume of evidence which includes a statement from Chris's partner Mandy, statements from members of the New South Wales Police Force and civilian witnesses, and an expert report regarding the vehicle examination. Oral evidence was also provided to the court on 10 March 2022 by Detective Senior Constable Simpson, Alfred and Anton. Pursuant to Section 81 of the Coroners Act, the coroner holding an inquest concerning the death of a person is required to make findings as to the identity of the person who died, when and where they died, and the manner and cause of death. In addition, as Your Honour knows, a coroner may make recommendations considered necessary or desirable in relation to matters which have the capacity to improve public health and safety in the future arising out of the death in question. In this inquest, Chris's identity is known, as is the date and place of his death. For this reason, the inquest into Chris's death focused on the manner and cause of his death. Senior Constable Anthony Pellicane from the New South Wales Police Force Engineering Investigation Section provided an expert report following a forensic mechanical examination of Chris's vehicle to determine if a mechanical failure may have been a contributing factor towards the collision. That examination, Your Honour, was conducted on 25 November 2019. In Senior Constable Pellicane's view, the examination revealed no mechanical defects or faults in the vehicle which may have been a contributing factor to have caused the vehicle to veer off the road. Detective Senior Constable Welsh investigated the scene on 9 November 2019. According to Detective Senior Constable Welsh, it appeared that the vehicle was travelling westward at a slow speed through thick smoke and had failed to negotiate a bend in the road and had driven straight off the embankment. Due to the slow speed of the vehicle, the weight of the engine at the front of the car, the shape and location of the gouge marks, and the height and slope of the embankment, the front of the car likely dropped over the embankment and rolled down. Detective Senior Constable Welsh did not observe any fire damage to the vehicle to suggest that it rolled after the fire had passed through the area. Importantly, a post-mortem toxicology analysis revealed no alcohol or illicit drugs in Chris's system. An external examination was conducted following Chris's death, which concluded that Chris's cause of death was multiple injuries. It is submitted, Your Honour, that Chris's cause of his death should be recorded as multiple injuries sustained in a car accident in the vicinity of 1678 South Arm Road after the Kian Road fire had passed through South Arm in the late afternoon or early evening on the late afternoon of 8 November 2019 or the early evening of 9 November 2019. I withdraw that, Your Honour. Had passed through South Arm in the late afternoon or early evening of 8 November 2019. The council assisting team, as we have done before, Your Honour, wish to express our sincere condolences to Chris's partner Mandy Brady and the extended Sava family, including his children Bianca, Amanda and Nicholas, grandchildren, other family and friends for the loss of Chris in such tragic circumstances. A sincere gratitude, Your Honour, is also expressed to Mandy and Chris's children for their involvement in the Coronial investigation and for liaising with the members of the team assisting Your Honour. Your Honour, that concludes my oral address in relation to the inquest into the death of Christopher Sava. Your Honour, that concludes today's inquest and fire inquiries. Tomorrow, for Your Honour's benefit and those at the bar table, I propose to address Your Honour on the Stage 2 communications and warnings and fire prediction modelling, and that will also deal with the Kangawalla Daiha file and the related inquests into the deaths of Vivian Chaplin and George Knoll. And then, of course, Your Honour, we'll hear addresses on the Badger Forest Fire and Dua National Park fire and the related inquests concerning the deaths of Colin Burns, John Smith and Richard Steele. There are other related inquests, but they will be dealt with on Wednesday morning, as I understand it. May it please Your Honour.
Thank you, Mr Castleton. We'll adjourn now until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.